Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to the main motion? Honourable member from Calgary-Currie, sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for this opportunity to address the Assembly on behalf of the Alberta Party and to bring greetings on behalf of our leader, Glenn Taylor. We've all had a few days to think about the new provincial budget, and first I want to engage in a little deconstruction of the budgeting process as practiced by the PC government. Provincial budgets are made up of two parts. There's the actual budget for the next 12 months, and then the way this government does it, there are projections for the 24 months to follow. Usually, the actual budget has at least a nodding acquaintance with the truth. Governments outline how much revenue they can reasonably expect to collect this year, how much they plan to spend, and on what they plan to spend it, how much of a surplus or deficit will be left once expenses are subtracted from revenue. And then they have a plan that they will follow more or less most of the time, provided nothing happens that makes the roof cave in. It's the budget projections for next year and the year after that, which can get pretty wackily fantastic, and where governments can pretty much just make stuff up if they want, because after all, they're just projections. Our best guesses, the consensus estimate of the experts we consult, etc., etc. And by the time the year after next actually gets here, and that thing that none of the experts foresaw has gone sideways to throw the projections out of whack, well, then government can throw up its hands and say, who knew? So, let's just accept that those projections for fiscal 2014-15, that provincial revenues will be $10 billion higher than they are today without so much as a penny in tax increases, that the streets will be paved in gold, and it won't matter if there's a water shortage because we'll all be swimming in milk and honey, that are just stuff the government made up this time. Let's just set that part of the budget aside for a minute and focus on the part that I call the actual budget. I think the government has got the actual budget for the next 12 months largely right. Here's what I mean. The spending commitments made for the next 12 months on a $400 monthly increase in payments to AISH recipients, on raises for vastly underpaid PDD contracted agency workers, on access to primary health care, on education, on seniors, reflect much of what the Alberta Party has heard from Albertans in our big listens, and they reflect much of what Albertans have been telling me for the last 10 years, both as an MLA and when I was in media, that they want from their government. Mr. Speaker, they've been trying to tell the government the same thing, of course. Now, there are things the government missed. Alberta is a world energy leader, and the Alberta Party believes that the government needs to be more clearly committed to doing the things necessary to ensure that we can remain so. And, Mr. Speaker, that's about opening up new markets and getting pipelines built, yes, but it's also about a stable regulatory and royalty environment that provides stability and certainty and confidence to industry and to government in the public interest to insist on and deliver on best practices, environmental stewardship, and continuous improvement in both. One of the most productive ways to achieve the economic diversification that all parties in this House seem to agree Alberta needs is to foster a culture of entrepreneurship. And to support such a culture, the Alberta Party is committed to provide a 0% small business tax rate for all new business startups for their first 3 years. There is new money committed in this budget to the establishment of 3 family care clinics as pilot projects. Indeed, we see that there is quite a bit of new money committed to health care. What is not so obvious is a clear commitment to ensure that everyone is able to easily access a primary care network, or a clear commitment to preventive care. Keeping the person healthy is cheaper than treating the person who is sick. And we need to shift the culture of our healthcare system and our healthcare thinking from the reactive practice of medicine more to the proactive prevention of disease and injury. We think this government is still struggling to accept that the kids have grown up and want to go out on their own. Our local governments, cities, towns, counties, and municipal districts make many of the decisions and provide much of the infrastructure and many of the services that have the most direct daily impact on our lives. Yet for all the talk of all the funding this government will provide to local governments, it still amounts to Dad giving the kids an allowance and lending them the keys to the car. Yes, it's a bigger allowance than they'd get if Mr. Manitoba down the street was their dad. And yes, from time to time, they even get to drive the Lexus, but it's still an allowance. And the kids are adults. And if the kids invite Dad over for breakfast, Dad ought to do the proper thing and go, not boycott breakfast because the kids criticized his budget. Local governments deserve to be formally recognized as an equal order of government. And education can benefit from the same kind of emphasis on local control. The Alberta Party is committed to decentralizing decision-making with regard to the construction, operation, and disposition of school facilities. Neither Calgary nor Camrose needs help from Edmonton in understanding what their kids need. For years, the PCs have shown that they don't have the ability to listen effectively or the courage to implement what Albertans say they want. This has been reflected in their Water for Life strategy, the Inspiring Education report, the report of the Premier's Council for Economic Strategy, and pretty much anything to do with the land use framework. Economically, actual provincial budgets concern themselves with the next 12 months. Politically, this actual budget has to get the PCs through the next 12 weeks or less. Which leads us back to the second part of this budget that contains the projections of another full-on boom within 2 years while all around us economies are ending up in the ditch. Now, Mr. Speaker, I suppose you could debate those rosy projections and the question of whether the government that came up with them was smoking something, and if so, whether they imported it from BC or grew it here at home, and although they don't mention it in this budget, have a secret plan to legalize or decriminalize and tax. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot that's a federal responsibility. But the projections in this budget don't matter. Why? Because as soon as this budget is passed, the government is going to call an election. Mr. Speaker, we believe, the Alberta Party believes, that the budgeting process itself must change. Not only does this mean zero-based budgeting to ensure a thorough review of provincial spending is conducted, an idea that we're pretty glad to see this government bring forward, actually, but a complete overhaul of the way budgets are built and planned. First and foremost, budget cycles should extend beyond election cycles. An election cycle is typically 4 years. When a government manages its finances over a 1, 2, or 3-year phase, it ends up making too many decisions in its own self-interest rather than in the public interest. And, Mr. Speaker, I don't care who's in power. PCs, Liberals, Wild Rose, New Democrats, us. Even if the honourable member from Vermilion-Lloydminster changes his mind about not running again and forms the Saskatchewan Party of Alberta, I think their chances of success are, you might say, borderline, but what do I know? When the budget cycle is shorter than the election cycle, any government will make decisions designed to enhance its own re-election chances. A lot like this budget, Mr. Speaker. A 5-year budget cycle puts Albertans first. The construction of the budget should be an open, collaborative, consultative process extending over several months, giving citizens a real chance to contribute and to understand the final result. The people need to be included in setting priorities and planning the budget on an ongoing basis so that the budget reflects their needs and their values. And where and when it doesn't, because it won't always, they may not like the result, but at least they'll understand how we got there. You can't do that authentically in a 2-week cabinet tour of Alberta weeks before the budget is released. We believe that even though this government has got a lot right in the actual budget for the next 12 months, its motivation for doing so was not long-term, but short-term, winning an election within the next 12 weeks. Here, however, is what does matter about the part of the budget which will follow the election. Throughout his budget speech, the Minister of Finance repeatedly returned to another theme that I've been hearing from Albertans for the last decade or more, and which is now loud enough that the government has concluded it finally has to at least pay lip service to it. We have got to start saving our non-renewable resource revenues and stop wasting our inheritance. So in that speech, there was much talk about the need to start saving, about the need to generate more sustainable, predictable revenue streams, and about the need to have an authentic province-wide conversation with Albertans about what that should look like. This means after the election, they're going to want to talk to you about possibly putting your taxes up. I agree, we need to talk. The Alberta Party caucus was the first to propose this conversation a year ago. We have said repeatedly that to get this government's finances on a sound footing so that the next generation will be better off than we are, not worse off, we all need to discuss what programs and services we expect from our government, how to save for the long term and how much to save, and if there's a shortfall between what we're paying in taxes today and what it costs to deliver the programs and the services that we demand, what we're prepared to do to make up the difference. It's not going to be an easy discussion, But Albertans are smart, tough, inventive, and focused on solutions. Albertans are the people who are ending homelessness. We know this province has almost unlimited potential, and we know we've come through a decade or more of being led by politicians who set the bar far lower than what we, the people, are capable of achieving. Mr. Speaker, through you to the people of Alberta, I'm sure the Premier will try to convince you that she needs a mandate from you to take you through that conversation, but she doesn't. By law, she has almost another year to go before she has to call that election. If she's truly serious about holding a province-wide big listen, she has up to 11 months to have that conversation with you now. Then she can go to the polls and seek your approval to set Alberta on a new and more stable course, a course you've helped design. That would be doing politics differently, Mr. Speaker. That would be putting Albertans first. Thank you.